Emily sat in the wooden pew, her eyes fixed on the pulpit where Pastor Jason stood, his voice resonating through the church like a soothing melody. His words, as always, used to touch something deep within her soul, stirring emotions she couldn't quite explain. It had been 8 years since she first walked into this church, invited by her neighbour Sarah to her son's baptism. Back then, Emily wasn't a churchgoer, a stranger to the hymns and rituals that now felt ingrained in her bones. But one sermon from Pastor Jason was all it took to crack open a part of herself she hadn't known existed. His compassion, his gentle demeanour, had drawn her in from the very beginning. She remembered that first Sunday vividly, how his words on forgiveness and redemption had moved her to tears, a torrent of emotions she hadn't acknowledged in years. She had sat alone afterward, a jumble of thoughts and a heart unexpectedly tender, trying to make sense of the newfound vulnerability that surprised her. And then he'd approached her, with his warm smile and his eyes that seemed to see right through the loneliness she hadn't realized she carried. "Are you okay, Sister Emily?" His voice was like a balm to her wounded soul, a kindness that disarmed. She found herself nodding, unable to speak, a dam breaking within her, threatening to release a flood of unspoken yearnings. From that day on, Emily was hooked. She couldn't explain it, but she felt drawn to Pastor Jason in a way she had never experienced before. It was more than respect, more than admiration. It was a connection that transcended words, a yearning for something she couldn't quite define. She found herself attending church every Sunday, not just for the sermons, but for the feeling of peace and solace his presence brought her. And as the weeks turned into months, she became one of the most devoted members of the congregation. She volunteered for the soup kitchen and helped organize the children's programs, all the while seeking opportunities to interact with Pastor Jason. But it wasn't just Pastor Jason's words that captivated her. It was his aura of kindness and understanding. He listened to her, truly listened, as she poured out her heart to him during counseling sessions, sharing her deepest secrets and fears without reservation. And in those moments, she felt seen and understood, a connection blossoming that filled a void she hadn't known existed. It was a dangerous intimacy, a blurring of lines that she, in her naivete, hadn't recognized. It wasn't long before their relationship crossed a line she hadn't dared consider. One evening, after a particularly emotional counseling session, he had lingered, his hand hovering over hers a fraction of a second too long. The touch sent a jolt through her, a spark igniting a fire she hadn't known existed. And when he leaned in, his lips brushing hers in a chaste kiss, Emily found herself surrendering, swept away by a current she couldn't control. Their affair was a whirlwind of stolen moments, hushed conversations in his office after prayer meetings, and afternoons spent hidden away in secluded corners of the church. His touch was like his words, gentle, soothing, yet filled with a power that left her breathless. And as they lay entwined in each other's arms, Emily felt a sense of euphoria, unlike anything she had ever known. But beneath the surface, guilt gnawed at her conscience like a persistent rodent. She was betraying her husband, Paul, a good man who deserved better. Yet she couldn't bring herself to end things with Pastor Jason, couldn't resist the pull of his presence. His touch, the way he made her feel alive in a way Paul, with his quiet ways and predictable routine, never had. As the affair continued, Emily found herself drifting further and further from Paul. Their once easy conversations became strained, filled with unspoken accusations and a growing distance. Their intimacy dwindled, replaced by a hollow politeness that emphasized the chasm growing between them. And then, one fateful day, everything came crashing down. A heated argument with Paul, fueled by weeks of unspoken resentment, drove Emily to seek solace in the arms of her lover. But what she found at the church shattered her world into a million pieces. There, in Pastor Jason's office, she discovered him with Sarah, her neighbour and friend, their clothes dishevelled, their faces flushed with a shared secret. Emily's heart shattered as she realised the depth of the betrayal. The man she loved, the man she had given her heart and her secrets to, had betrayed her in the worst possible way. And as she fled from the church, tears streaming down her face, she knew that her life would never be the same again. Now, as Emily sits alone in her car, the echoes of Pastor Jason's betrayal ringing in her ears, she faces a crossroads. Should she confront him, demand answers, or should she walk away, leave this painful chapter of her life behind? The answer isn't clear, but one thing is certain. Emily's journey is far from over, and the path ahead is fraught with uncertainty and pain. What do you think? What's your advice for Emily?